Call the city council work session to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Moore.
Here.
Here. Whitman. Here. Iguangeli. Here. Vining.
I know Jermaine is excused. I know Councilwoman Vining is coming. She was out with a bookmobile, but
Jermaine is excused.
yes, she is excused.
Okay, and Vining is on her way. Mayor Clark.
Here. So we have our work session to start. I know that Mr. Pastu, you've put a few items on that agenda for discussion, so I'll just kind of go to you and see which order you want to go in.
Thank you, Your Honor. First item is DDA update with Net Knowles, talking about the proposed bylaw changes and also the streetscape design studio. Net?
Good evening.
It's even on. Yes. Well, you really have to come down here, don't you? Okay. This is not comfortable, so
You should be all
hopefully
right.
I can speak loud
Hear you.
enough that
We
you
can
can
hear you
hear
right
me. So I have two items to introduce this evening. The first is a proposed bylaw revision for the DDA. The DDA last updated its bylaws in October of 2017. At the time those bylaws were updated, there was one article, Article 8, which has to deal with committee structure, that was left unrevised because the board was transitioning from standing committees to project-based work teams, and they wanted to fully implement that to see what items needed to be updated and how those committees would function to get a better sense of that procedure. So those transitions of the committee structure have been completed, which renders the bylaws obsolete at this point in time. So the board convened an ad hoc group to study Article 8 primarily. We encountered some other issues that I'll address in just a moment. And that committee did rewrite Article 8 and made other minor changes. The committee structure included the mayor, the chairperson of the DDA, Joe Peruski, and another board member, Les Lukash. At its May 15th meeting, the DDA board adopted the bylaws revision that I have attached. And then the next step would be for the mayor and council to approve those bylaws. I wanted to highlight what the revisions were. So first off, the enabling legislation from the state for downtown development authorities was recodified this last year in 2018. So now we need to reference Act 57 of 2018 in the bylaws. There were a couple locations where the old Act 197 of 1975, too many numbers to remember, was the former iteration, and now we have Act 57, which is the recodified Tax Increment Financing Act. So there were a couple references to change there. But again, we revised Article 8 to provide clarification of what the Downtown Reinvestment Grant Committee would look like, also to eliminate the other standing committees and replace them with ad hoc committees or project-based work teams. The board also established that they would appoint members of the committees and not just the leads on those committees. And then lastly, they wanted to establish a term limit for committee chairs to 2 years. So it would encourage turnover in committee chairs and also a way to keep fresh ideas and to make it so that the committees wouldn't necessarily stagnate. Given that each of the committee chairs is a board member, it's also a way to keep rotation going and to provide for growth of board members. So future action is to ask the mayor and council to amend the bylaws. The DDA adopted those bylaws again at its meeting on May 15th. questions that you may have about bylaws at this point.
Any questions from council members for Annette? I don't see any at this time.
Okay.
The intent is, we'll probably bring that to our first meeting in June for council action, to put it on, probably under the consent agenda, since it's primarily, deal with their governance with the committees, most of the action, so.
All right, moving right along.
Yep.
I'm also want to introduce the topic of, downtown Monroe streetscape design standards. I've included a fact sheet that was distributed at the table. This project was included in the recently adopted downtown master plan under upgrade the public realm planning principle. So we started this project a few months ago. The project purpose is to establish streetscape design standards and to pursue a phased approach to implementation. As new streetscape projects are developed, they will have the same consistency in look and feel, with some variations depending upon the location within the DDA district and the uses thereof. Team members on the project team, the lead from the DDA board on this project is Les Lukash. There are other team members, including Patrick Lewis, Janet Burns, Jim Jacobs, Ryan Hauser, Steve Mahalik, and Woodrow Hoffer II. Professional support provided by the Russell Design team. Steps we've already taken with this project include data gathering. We completed a walking audit, which it was the committee members themselves. We also had an in-person visual preference survey, which invited external stakeholders. The participation in that visual preference survey for the in-person version was not well attended, largely due, in our opinion, to a really bad weather day. So given that we didn't have enough public input, we decided to expand that and do an online iteration of the visual preference survey. So that was opened on Friday. The best source of the link to the visual preference survey is on the Downtown Monroe page on Facebook. But we have had over 220 respondents thus far, so that's a good start. The link will stay open through Tuesday, May 27th, and on the screen is a copy or the live version of the initial introductory page. The actual URL for the survey is so long and complicated, I would recommend interested persons who want to complete the visual preference survey go to Facebook and connect it from there. So the visual preference survey is intended to capture community perceptions about the design direction for future projects. For example, do community members prefer a more traditional approach to design and site furnishings, something more modern, or a blend of the two? Instructions are to look at the subject pictures, not necessarily the quality of the photos, but we're looking at more of the context of it. The photos are intended to illustrate conceptual ideas. They are not specific proposals. These are ideas at this point. Cannot emphasize that enough. Keep in mind the photos are not intended to raise false expectations. Photos are intended to help spur ideas or help people imagine what is possible. So basically the question we're looking to answer through the visual preference survey is how well do these images match the respondents' vision for what downtown Monroe could be. The next steps after the visual preference survey is completed is to use the survey results to generate a design direction and to select site furnishings that align with the community preferences. The intention is to complete the project by the end of June with a presentation by the designers shortly afterward. So really my presence here this evening is to encourage participation in the visual preference survey. Again, it will remain open for about another week, and then we'll use that information to help finalize the project and hopefully be able to come back to the DDA board and the council with a presentation more likely in, I'm going to say probably July or into early August, with what the results of the exercise have been. Again, able to answer any questions if you have any.
So having had the opportunity to, on the day you had it downtown at the photography studio, there's a variety of kind of themes or discussion topics as well as selections for people to look at. Because I know there's one was about there's structural things, gateway type signs, benches, other amenities,
Whole kit and
sidewalk.
caboodle.
Yeah, so
Anything
there's,
in the public realm. So it's
yeah,
sidewalks, what the sidewalks might look like, what the furnishings on the sidewalks might look like, what kind of vegetation or landscaping might be there,
right.
what wayfinding we might see. It also goes down to some of the mechanical items, so
Okay.
parking meters versus parking kiosks, other types of improvements as well.
well, there's, I think, 120 or 30
Images.
images. There, it goes quickly, so it's not where you think you're gonna be sitting there for 10
Right.
minutes trying to get through all this. It moves along, and if you miss one, it'll come back around a second time.
Yeah, it's primarily you're giving an idea, a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Sure.
Either you like it or you don't like it. We're not asking for a lot of content as far as written content or comments. It's primarily look at the picture, do you like it or not?
First glimpse.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions from council?
Yeah, I know that Councilman Icoangeli in the past had commented on, I believe it was Councilman Icoangeli, if I'm not mistaken, about the outside seating for some of the restaurants in the downtown.
Oh,
And standardizing the format by which they would
right.
have their setups. I was wondering if something like that could be incorporated, because it seems to fit along nicely with sort of the atmosphere you're trying to create on the street and a streetscape design overall, so.
Yeah, there actually is a segment in the survey about outdoor seating. So the challenge is with outdoor seating is you've got restaurants or other purveyors of those types of things who might not necessarily, their goals might not align with yours. But you are providing them an opportunity to use outdoor space. So usually the sidewalks is the public purview. So there is some opportunity to mandate, regulate, whatever word you want to use, what the seating could look like. My experience, I would probably provide a couple options for what the businesses might use instead of
The general theme, certainly.
Right, yeah.
And I would hope that some of the results of that would be made available to the business owners that probably would see that as some
we will
fairly useful
absolutely, yeah.
information.
You know, one of the whole reasons for doing this is trying to elevate the public space, but also everyone's in the same, we're all in the same boat here. So we all want the downtown to look better and feel better, especially for the patrons who might frequent a business. And so the more opportunity we have to make this feel like the community's living room, the more likely it's going to be that people will want to visit and linger and stay. And so I understand there's a potential for argument that, I want to brand this according to my restaurant on the inside, but we also have to think of it and balance that in terms of what is going to set the right tone for the downtown in the future.
Okay. Other questions? Nope. Very good. Thank you, Annette.
For your time this evening.
Thanks. Estu?
Next item is to provide council with an update regarding the Comfort Inn Suites elevation that we had talked about at our last work session.
Very good.
Past two, Jeffrey Green, Director of Community Development. On the dais tonight, you should have a couple of sheets, Sheet 1 and Sheet 2. The Sheet 2 is the revised version. That would be really the one I would suggest looking at this evening. And at the last council meeting, 2 weeks ago, you, as council, took action to approve the preliminary plan with certain additions. Those conditions were adding brick or masonry to the two primary elevations on the Comfort Suites Hotel at 1150 Turns Drive, which basically are the north and the west elevations of that building. Since that time, I've had a chance to talk with one of the owners, the applicants, Raj Patel. I've talked with Bill Jarrett, the architect, and as well as Louis Loniger, who is the contractor. Mr. Loniger is with us this evening as well to talk a little bit about this, or hear what's going on with it, I should say. So on sheet number 2, what we're looking at is the areas that are outlined in the dashed red borders are essentially those areas that have had brick or masonry added to them. And quite quickly, I'll go through these. On the south elevation, which is up at the top left-hand corner, we have brick added to both the east and west corners of that elevation. Again, those are outlined in the dashed red borders. On the north elevation, brick was added to the tower, the central tower with the Comfort Suites sign. As well, and one thing I would note on this one is the area around the sign at the top is identified as EFS. It's identified as a keynote number 10. And I'm thinking that probably should be brick. I have contacted Mr. Jarrett. I did not get a response to him. But on all the other elevations in which we're able to see the tower, it's identified as brick. The east elevation, essentially we have a masonry belt course on the south half of the east elevation. Again, that's outlined on there. And on the west elevation, which has had the most brick or masonry added, we see brick around the windows and the upper floors, again outlined in red and having a lot of infill underneath those brick or underneath those window areas. Now we do have on those, we have several bays, or which we would call a bay. The first and third are those that had masonry added to them. The second and the fourth bays on that elevation are in EFS. They sit back a little bit and they give a little bit of visual breakup just to having a solid monolithic wall. And so that idea for us for planning and for architecture, I think, is not a bad thing. I think that gives some interest to the building and to those elevations. But essentially, that is the extent of my report. It appears, as I've went through this now over the last couple of weeks, they have made a number of attempts to add additional masonry as requested by City Council, and have accomplished that. We've made a quantum leap from where we began some time ago. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I'll see if council has any questions. Right off.
What's the percentage of increase in the amount of brick between sheet 1 and sheet 2?
I don't have that at this point, and we would probably be having that on the final plans as they're drawn up by Mr. Jarrett. We would request that.
Okay.
Councilman's looking at some
I'm
additional
going
thought.
through, very
Yeah.
quickly to take a look at the,
And I'll see if there's other questions as John kind of goes through that. Other questions from council? Just first glance, I think it is getting to where the council at least had some discussions that we're looking for. I think knowing some amounts, percentages or whatever, obviously then trying to figure out what it is, we hear a number and see if that looks at it.
I would say from the original plans that we saw,
Yeah.
the amount of brick versus EFS is probably almost completely inverted. We started out with almost all EFS and very little brick, and now the EFS is confined again to those couple of bays on the west elevation, which are recessed, as well as to those non-primary elevations, primarily the south and in part of the east.
As I look through it, for me, it's getting to where I think that, or at least kind of what I was envisioning. I think it's definitely the improvement we have asked for, but I'll see if there's other comments from council too.
And you will note that on the keynote, which is the little legend on the right-hand side, the brick added is all different colors of brick. There are several colors in there, browns and aspen whites and things like that to set it off. So it's not just one brick color, but a variable of brick colors in there, as well as the different colors on the ephes.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm looking to Mr. Green or Mr. Pat, well, Mr. Green, I'll say, what, next steps, is it something that, opportunities to kind of move forward, or where we're at?
Well, at this point, and I'll look to Mr. Buds for a response as well, but at this point, what we were looking for by the motion at the last city council meeting was basically approving this with those conditions, and essentially, it's up to council to decide if they have met those conditions at this point, and I guess I would defer to
And we're not
Mr.
making
Buds at this
motions here at a
point.
work session, but the general responses
General
might
consensus,
get
yeah.
you the direction to go back to the planning commission with a feel of how that is. Mr. Buds?
Your Honor, I would say that what occurred at the last city council meeting was approval with the conditions to add brick. Obviously, there's been discussion about whether that's been met. I would say the next step at this point is for the applicant to submit their final site plan to the Citizens Planning Commission. They can take that into account and make a determination, and then it would come back before this body for the approval of the final site plan, final PUD plan, and also the PUD agreement that I would prepare.
Other questions from council? Brian?
Yeah, so this basically has to go back to the CPC.
Yes, if the decision or the consensus here tonight is that they have met those they were asked to do at the last meeting, then this would be sent to the planning commission basically as the final plan. And they would review it, make a recommendation on that, and it would come back to, again, you, along with the PUD agreement, which Mr. Buds will draft.
It's basically just for them to see the changes that have been made.
Yes.
Correct, because they've already basically passed everything that they've seen.
Yes, and again, that's if the applicant is not anticipating any further changes to the project. We assume not, and in discussions, they've indicated that they would not be making further changes once they got to a point where it was acceptable. But again, that's an option for them. They do have a little bit of time. Typically, there's a degree of time, almost up to a year, in which they can get a preliminary plan and then take action on the final plan. This is a little more condensed.
Your Honor, I was just going to kind of piggyback on that. Essentially, it would go to the CPC for the final site plan. Sometimes that happens in short order. Sometimes that takes a longer period of time. Here, we're relatively quick between the submission of the preliminary and the anticipated, I'll say at this point, submission of the final. I would say what we would expect is kind of the full package, so landscape, the whole, everything to be submitted as a final package to the CPC, including these revised elevations.
Other comments? John?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Jeff, I guess my only comment would be, and it looks like they have kind of reversed the amount of between ephes to brick, okay? It would be interesting, because that was a issue in the final, would be to have the architect, because he's got this, obviously, it looks like it's an AutoCAD, he's got it colored. It would be interesting just to see, turn the colors off, have the architect take the first version and highlight the areas that were brick on sheet 1 versus what's going to be brick on sheet 2. And get rid of the coloration, because it would be that way, it would be very quick. It'd be the planning commission could quickly see how much of the building went from ephes to brick without having to go through and look at all the colors and the numbers.
Okay.
More of a visual. I think in doing that, the architect then could actually give the planning commission what the percentage of brick is versus ephes on the overall building. So, but yeah, definitely much more brick on this iteration, so.
Good. Brian?
Question. Regarding the approval, if the CPC does approve of this at their meeting, which will be basically a week before our second meeting in June. Is this possible we could have it set up for approval for us for the second meeting in our second meeting in June?
Yeah, we think so. Yeah, I think at this point with the discussions and where we're getting to, at least for me, you know, the idea is now to keep it moving and get I think John's comment on just throwing the difference, I think will be an easy visual to see the change and support, hopefully. But also we want to move the project, as I know there's other steps to this as well with the site plan, as was mentioned, and to make sure we can move along quickly, because I'm sure they would want to get started as well. Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you.
Mr. Pastou.
Next item that we have is with the fire department, some proposed equipment purchases. Chief White and Captain Foley. I think Captain Foley's doing the presentation tonight. But what we're looking at doing and recommending from administration is utilizing $50,000 toward these purchases from the bond proceeds that we have for the fire station project. Last week, Assistant Manager, Finance Director Ed Sell, myself, Patrick Lewis, and Aaron St. Dennis with AUK Construction went through pretty detailed where we are in the project, and certainly both Mr. Sell, all of us were comfortable recommending this amount. Some of our FF&E that we had, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, came in substantially lower than what we had budgeted. So we're comfortable from an administration standpoint recommending council consider it, and Captain Foley will go through the merits of the request.
Mayor and council, Captain Foley, City of Monroe Fire. So the first page, we weren't sure if you put the number on the first page or the last page. We went with the first page because it's a big number. So.
Always put the numbers first.
Well, that's how we decided to go, because it was a pretty good number. So anyways, if you turn to the second page, one of the things that we came up with the new trucks that you guys approved was outfitting those vehicles with hose and so you know, LDH is large diameter hose, which is our supply line. Okay, so what we found out when we were going through our station, purely coincidental, was we have a lot of hose that's expiring. NFPA requires a 10-year replacement of hose. So the hose testing company that we have came through, and they put this big X on the hose that we have, and it pretty much takes any question out of the fact that whether or not you should be using it. So NFPA also changed, I believe in 2015, the requirements for flow of a fire. The standard for the growth of a fire 20 years ago was doubles in size every minute, and now you're talking 30 seconds, it doubles in size, and I think you're going to see in the near future that number is going to change also. So what happened with NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, was they started to do some testing on what kind of fire flow you should have when you first make an attack on a fire inside of the building. The days of old, about 100 gallons per minute, and it was definitely off the cuff. There was no science to it. That was kind of where we were at, 100 gallons a minute. This was a far more comprehensive approach. So what we found was 1 3/4 hose provided a much higher flow. I know only a 1/4 inch sounds like it wouldn't, but it really does provide a significant higher flow. And with the advent in technology with nozzles that is out there, particularly slide valves and things of that nature, you were able to achieve the new NFPA standard, which is 300 gallons a minute with the first arriving alarm, right? So the first arriving units should be able to flow 300 gallons a minute. That would be 150 gallons per line, per attack line, right? So we had hose vendors come over. We went through 3 different manufacturers, different styles, types of hose. One of the things that's come in the fire service now is, instead of it being this real high pressure to achieve this real high flow of water, they've, with the nozzles and the technology, not to go into all that, but the technology of it, it's a lower pressure, which a much higher flow. So what happens then is you have a nozzle reaction. You can imagine on 1.5 inches with a regular nozzle, you crank it up to 195 PSI, you're flowing about 130 gallons a minute. You're still not getting where you're supposed to, not to mention 195 PSI is an untenable line for anybody. I'm a pretty good sized guy, and it would throw me around pretty good. So they came up with this low flow. We tested multiple nozzles, multiple hose, went through We got a flow meter so we could see exactly how many gallons we were flowing, so we could be compliant with NFPA. Anyways, that brought us to the 1.75 inch. We have 60 lengths of 1.75 inch or 1.5 inch right now that's going to expire anyways. So the opportunity, it has to be replaced anyways. We thought, you know what, let's make the change right now. We'll be compliant with NFPA. We'll get the 150 gallons a minute that we're looking for per hand line. So that kind of led to the large diameter hose. We're going to have to supply the truck with that. That stuff's 10 years. Most of it, there has to be a replacement program. So anyways, the LDH, the 5-inch large diameter hose. That pretty much covers the 1.75 inch. I hope I didn't bore you guys with all that technological stuff and stuff you probably don't care about anyways. But also,
No,
we're going
we
to
do.
switch. I'm sorry?
We do.
Okay. We're going to switch. Everything on both trucks is going to be similar. So we're not going to have anything different. You're going to have the same hose, the same nozzles, the same flow, the same everything on each truck will be exactly the same. So you're not going to have to make a choice whether it's 1.5 inch, 1.75 whatever your attack is. Everything will be there'll be continuity throughout the whole thing. Again, I went over the low pressure and the low flow. It increases the gallons and it decreases the nozzle reaction with what you're dealing with.
You stand for.
Task Force Tips. It's the company. There's Elkhart Brass, Task Force Tips. I forgot what the last one was, but anyways, Task Force is a definitely on the cutting edge of creating fire nozzles. Anyways, so that's pretty much the hose and the nozzles and the attack part of it. Power tools. So the new trucks that we bought, and we really toiled with this because in the fire service, there's a generator on every truck. Because you can imagine we need power at night to do lights and run generator. We have generators on our trucks for our extrication equipment because the pumps are electric that run the jaws and the O cutters and things like that. Well, technology has changed and the generators have become kind of a thing of the past. So we really started to think about it differently, right? If we get rid of the generator off the truck, you have your extrication equipment, which is battery powered now anyways. All the lights on the truck are LED, so it doesn't draw any power. So it really was a big change for us. And we really struggled with getting rid of the generator because that's every fire truck has a generator, right? Well, we did. We got rid of it. That's a $30,000 option times 2. But with that, there's some changes that have to happen with the equipment on the vehicle. So right now we have some extrication equipment that is battery powered. That's on engine 2, which is out the west side. Engine 1 still has the generator, the pump, and all the hoses for the extrication equipment. That's the part we want to get rid of because you really have this umbilicus that you're stuck to the truck, so you can only go as far as the hose will allow you. A couple times we've been on the scene on I-75 where we have to go down the embankment and we really can't reach, so we have to reposition the truck. So one of the added advantages is we're going to go to more battery-powered equipment because we don't have the generator or the need for the generator. We're trying to stay with the same battery platform we have now, so we don't have multiple battery platforms, which is exactly what we're asking for here with the Genesis spreader. But I think, Mr. Pastu, if I'm not mistaken, you said that was going to come out of this year's budget.
Correct.
So that was something that was already figured on. The portable LED lights, obviously we use a lot of lights on scene. All of the lights on this truck, the scene lights that are mounted to the vehicle are all LED. They use 1/10 the power that the incandescent lights used to use, okay? So we really save a lot of, don't need that generator again. With that, we need some type of lighting inside of the building. Right now, we have a cord that we pull out, and then we put the lighting inside of the building so guys can do salvage and overhaul and go through the building and make sure everything is taken care of. Well, these would be the same battery platform running on an LED light. And as you guys are probably aware, LEDs, you can't run them down. The batteries last forever on an LED light. So that covers the LED torch light part of it. Honda generator. We have Honda generators which have a light on them. We have one right now that's significantly older. It still works good and runs good, but we're looking to switch that to an LED because then it provides us with a 2,000 watt generator who's only running an LED light. In the event that we do need some type of a generator power, we still have that, plus we have the Honda light. So that's another purchase we're looking to make. Again, I guess what I would reiterate again is that we save $60,000 on the purchase of the vehicle, deleting the generators, but there is some changes that have to happen. So that brings me down to the apparatus miscellaneous. There are NFPA requirements for cones and traffic control devices that are on the vehicle. So we kind of looked at the cost of those. The collapsible ones, which are kind of convenient, are really expensive. So we thought, you know what, we can mount something on the back of the truck and put regular cones on there to give you a cost analysis. So we're talking $80 for collapsibles, and we're talking $15 for regular cones. So we kind of thought $15 regular cones is probably the way to go. Mounting hardware. Being a mechanic back when we bought engine one, when we were mounting the equipment on it, it was kind of a shotgun pattern, creating our own mounting hardware, putting things on the truck. Not a particularly systematic approach to it. They do have mounting hardware now that is specific to the pieces of equipment that you're mounting. So what you have is you've eliminated the problem of things flying around in the cab in the event of an accident or something like that. High speed, you really secure all of your equipment. Plus, your equipment probably lasts a lot longer because it's not banging around in the compartments and stuff. The hand tools. There's obviously some need for replacement of hand tools, axes and Halligans and things of that nature. The next one was a significant expense, which is the Class A foam. We call it Class A foam. It's actually an emulsifier. So Class A foam, I'm sure you guys heard of PFAS. It's all over the news. The foam that we currently are using right now, FireAid, has a very low amount of PFAS, but it does have PFAS. There was a communication from the state fire marshal recently, and he said, stop, do not buy this, anything with PFAS in it in high quantities. Don't buy it because we don't know when it's coming down, but it's coming down and it's going to be gone. You guys aren't going to be able to use it. So we're thinking we'll just get ahead of it right now. We found a supplier that has similar product. It does work as well, and so that's that. We're trying to switch out to that one. We do have some current PFAS, very small amounts of PFAS in the foam that we're using. We're going to get that out of the system, and we're going to go with the environmental stuff.
What do you use the foam for?
Foam. This is actually an emulsifier. This emulsifier bonds with the carbon molecules in a fire and stops them from burning. For example, if I had a pan full of fuel and I lit it on fire with a flare, okay, I can take a cup of this emulsifier, literally do this, pour it in there, and as it spreads out through the pan that's on fire, it will put it out, and you cannot relight it. It bonds on a molecular level, okay? So what happens in a structure fire is, with this mixed, it's pre-mixed on the truck, goes down the line to the guys on the attack. It provides that much more fire suppression, and you really can tell the difference. When you're inside of a structure and you're hitting it with something with foam versus just water, you can really tell the difference. It puts a fire out real fast. So it's a chemical bond that happens with this emulsifier that we call Class A foam. The old days of foam.
How is it transported? Through the water itself?
Through the water. It's mixed internally on the pump on the truck. There's an injection system.
Oh, okay.
So there's a 35-gallon tank on the truck of this Class A foam, and it mixes. You throw a lever in the truck, it mixes with at whatever percentage you want, 3%, 6%, or whatever percentage you're looking for, and it mixes with the water, goes down the line, on the attack line, and into the fire with the guys on the line. And that's pretty much how it works. There are other foams that use as a blanket, like on fuel spills and stuff, where you're just removing the oxygen part of it. This is a completely different animal.
What is the $3,400 for the foam? I mean, is that a quantity of foam?
That is a year's supply.
A year's supply?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what we figured out how many we used last year, knowing that we were asking for a lot of money. So what we thought was, for this budget year, this is what we used last year. So we can anticipate that that's what we're going to use this year, and then we'll have a replacement program as it goes.
Question for the manager. Will this line item start just showing up in the regular budget?
It's already there.
It's already there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So,
it's a supply expense that they would incur, annually. Part of it is, and where you go with this is one that made, from an accounting standpoint, Mr. Sell a little nervous for that reason. It's really an ongoing operating use. I mean, it's changing the material, but the feeling is it's going to go through an ongoing annual operating budget. So we probably shouldn't use the bond proceeds is where I'm going with it. And so we had talked with our bond attorney, and that one he kind of said, it's maybe not. So that's where I said the 50,000 is perfectly fine for a lot of these more equipment items that are going to be equipped with.
and then the other 12, like the foam, would come out of their regular budget?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll handle the spread and the disbursement how that would come.
I guess that's the question, maybe it's the same question John had, is looking at the front sheet with the cost analysis here, some of that's coming through the bond, is what you're saying, and some, of course, makes sense because it's not,
Yeah.
wouldn't fit that definition, would come out of the
Yep.
regular maintenance or budget for the department then. Okay.
You know, just for example, certainly the first three items dealing with the, the supply hose and nozzles, those are clearly eligible. I would look at the mounting hardware for the new truck as a capital item that would be certainly appropriate. And then even like the portable LED light and the portable generator LED light there as well, being capital items. So we get to the 50,000, but some of it is going to come out of the operating for this current year budget, and some of it will be ongoing thereafter.
Go ahead, John.
Well, a couple of these items that we went through, for example, there's money for a Honda portable generator with an LED light. Does that generator also power the e-torch portable LED lights?
Those are portable and they run off of the same battery platform as the extrication equipment.
Okay.
And all the tools that we have, obviously we got screw guns and sawzalls and extrication
Right.
equipment and things like, so that would be a battery that mounts into a portable light that we can take into a structure.
Okay.
A lot of times when the fire's out, of course, they generally happen at night anyways. And the fire's out, we really can't see in the house because the power's off.
Right.
So we need some way to illuminate it in
Sure.
there. So that's what we're using those for.
All right.
And
And-
the other thing is the chief just pointed out, kind of whispered to me back here, is that's times 2 trucks on the PFAS on the foam. Okay, so that's an I'm sorry? 60 gallons. Yeah, 66 gallons per truck.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And then the Genesis spreaders, we don't currently have those?
We do have one spreader, okay, that's it's what we call a combi tool. It's not, because it has a cutting device, it has a spreading device, what they call a combination tool. This is more of a spreader. So when you go with a combi tool or combination tool, you lose some pressure for, let's say it's 24,000 PSI to open a door on a car or something. If you go to a traditional spreader, it'll be 32,000 PSI because it's only a spreader, right? So now currently in the system, we have a traditional spreader, traditional cutter, and then we also have the combination tool. But Engine One is going to take, when we sell it, we're going to take the generator and the pump for all of that equipment that is not on the new truck, and it's going to go with that truck. So now we're going to go with a more non-traditional approach with the battery-operated stuff, and we've had great performance out of the battery-operated equipment that we have in the system right now. I was a little reticent when we first bought it, but it's really good stuff. So good equipment.
To the foam,
I'm sorry?
use life, like how long it's good for, shelf life, yeah.
I don't know the answer to the question. I'm embarrassed that I don't know the answer, but I don't know the answer to that. I've never heard of it expiring. Now, the
Right.
old AFFF foam from days of old,
Okay.
there was a shelf life on that, and I think it was 5 years from.
Okay, I knew it was a while, but I didn't know, and didn't know if this was the same. Brian?
Questions regarding the water flow and the hoses. Is there a larger size available? Like maybe we could stay ahead of the game?
There is, but once you start getting into a larger size, then you've got the issue of dragging that through a house, and it's always been,
Okay.
an old adage is, big water, big fire kind of thing. So if you can start going to a 2.5-inch hose on an attack line, now you got a 2.5-inch hose that you're dragging through a door, potentially through a house, up a set of stairs, and so there's a tipping point there that
Is that going to cause an encumbrance when you going from the 1.5 to 1 3/4, or?
the one, it's a little heavier. It's surprising that 1/4 inch makes that much of a difference.
Sure.
But it does, and it's a little heavier. The difference with this is this particular hose is that the one that we decided that we really liked was designed by a gentleman who was a fireman in Seattle. Had a couple guys that were killed in line of duty, and what had happened was it was burned through. Okay, and impinged on fire. The abrasion resistance was not that good on the hose that they had. Consequently, these guys got killed. So this guy took it upon himself to make this new hose. It's a little more stiff than we're used to, but it definitely has some abrasion resistance, and it's real durable. And like I said, we flowed some water. I'm sure you guys drove by and saw us out there with we were running tons of water trying to figure out how much we're flowing, what our gallons are, rate per minute, and all that. So
What's the life expectancy for this new hose that we're gonna buy?
the 10-year NFPA is 10 years to replace it. Now, I know the chief and the city manager have talked about a replacement, which the chief already has a replacement program in place, but unfortunately, not unfortunately, there's an opportunity here because we have 2 new trucks. Let's just outfit them with the upcoming, what's coming,
Okay. And as far as the power tools go, what is the current battery platform that we're using?
Milwaukee. It's Milwaukee tools. It's the same 18 volt. Is it 24 or 18 volt? 24 volt Milwaukee that you've probably got at home.
Yep.
And that we went with that because it's such you can go to Lowe's and Home Depot and get a replacement battery. It just seemed real convenient for us. So
Andrew?
Thank you, sir. I also had a question about the water flow. Increasing diameter obviously increases the water flow, but that also decreases the amount of time you got on the initial, because the truck comes loaded with a certain amount of water ready to go, right?
correct. There's these trucks have 750
So you're
gallons.
decreasing the amount of time that you have available on that initial supply
Yes.
until you get the pump hooked up. How much time are we losing there? And how are we going to have to adjust our response times to get the pump operator on site and get it hooked up, ready to resupply? Is that 30 seconds? Is
In
that-
my, I don't know that I can give, you're talking about getting a supply to the truck. 750 gallons of water on a room and contents fire is enough water to go in and put the fire out. You can tell very quickly, I can tell very quickly when I pull up if I'm gonna need a hydrant or if I'm not gonna need a hydrant. Occasionally I maybe make a misdirection there, but the fact is that I can tell pretty quickly. So as far as the water usage, the new trucks have a smaller tank, which is common because we're putting more and more stuff on these trucks. So they have 750 gallons. With a 1,000-gallon tank with an 1.5-inch line, you've got about 8 or 9 minutes of water flowing full flow with an 1.5 inches. With the 1 3/4 at 150 gallons a minute, the math is not that complicated. You're looking at about 4 minutes of water, full flow. You're running that line, okay?
And that's down
Now,
from about,
understand you don't run in like a crazy person, open the line and just go through somebody's house.
Sure.
It's a directed attack at the seat of the fire. You're going through the house, through into the affected area. It's in putting that water. So a lot of times you're not using that much water, but you can tell very quickly. For example, the house, I think it was 2nd Street recently, I was in charge of that fire, and I knew immediately that we're gonna need a hydrant. So you can tell very quickly that you're either you have enough or you don't.
yeah.
So
And we were at about 5 minutes with the old truck and hose combo.
If you were running an 1.5 inches at 100 gallons a minute, which is pretty much where we're at, you've got 1,000 gallons. But math would tell you about 10 minutes. It's probably closer to 8 or 9.
Okay.
Okay. And with this new complement of hose, it's 150 gallons a minute in a 750-gallon tank.
Okay.
I'll probably have to take my shoes off to do the math on that one.
That's fair.
yeah.
I don't want to be crass or make you guys nervous, but in lieu of the operational assessment that's coming up and the obvious questions that are going to be asked about the response time that we're requiring, I just want to make sure that the equipment choices that we're making that are going to have an effect down the line are just going to be aligned and we're making choices that are compatible with one another. That's sort of the
From my end of
purpose
it,
the
where
question.
if I may, I'm comfortable with it in the fact that they are the existing replacement hoses are no longer NFPA compliant. I think from an operational standpoint, that the command staff obviously has got the experience in how to handle and assess those cases. So I think I'm comfortable from there. We are replacing non-compliant hoses with something new, and I would imagine they would probably be able to hook up to a hydrant quick enough before the tank is emptied if they deemed that on site quick enough. I'm comfortable with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and not to say that we wouldn't purchase the equipment, but just to ensure that
Yeah.
when the next decisions come, that we staff the department appropriately in order to be able to get the pumping crew to get the pump operator on scene in an appropriate amount of time to accommodate the choices that we've made for the equipment that we're buying.
Correct. Yeah, and I
that's-
think if I may just add a little to it, right off the start, Captain Foley was talking about uniformity. You're going to have the same hose and nozzle systems in place with all the trucks going forward, so that, that does give them enough flexibility at the scene to determine how that attack's going to take place. So rather than pulling 2 or 3 different hoses, you've got one that's.
And that increases efficiency.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
I think. Go ahead. I'm sorry. No.
And then mostly a curiosity question. Why was the PFAS foam used for so long? Was it just a cheaper option? Were the alternative substitutes not developed yet, or?
Honestly, Councilman Felder, it worked. I
it.
guess is all I can tell you.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, we didn't know about it. It's not like we were buying it and knew about it. There was some whisper 15 years ago in my career about some environmental issue with the foam, the emulsifier that we're
Yeah.
using, because it was kind of new on the market, but we didn't know, we had no idea, and so I think.
Not leveling
No,
accusations
not at all.
just-
I'm not
it's-
taking it
it's
that way, but we really didn't,
custody.
this was completely legal and everything was good and it worked really well. So they had to go back to the drawing board and come up with a different formula with something that didn't have that in it, so.
That's a fair answer.
A couple questions, and I think Vince might answer it. It was about the compliance. You said a compliance date is coming. I didn't know exactly when that was.
Nope.
But also, and you said they're going to expire anyways, so it must be getting close to the 10-year life?
Okay, there's the requirement for foam or.
No, I'm
or
talking
for
about the hoses. I'm back.
2015, I believe, was the change in NFPA. That is a requirement that you flow, first arriving alarm is 300 gallons a minute, 2 hand lines, 150 gallons a minute per hand line.
So I'm going to go to the equipment list, because I think you said it, that there's kind of a replacement schedule. When I look at this, and maybe it gets a little bit to what Andrew says as well, is there I'll say replacement schedule, a comprehensive list of all the equipment that would come forward? Because obviously we're talking about these items, but everybody knows that our capital improvements, you look.
Let me just answer.
I'm not done with my question yet.
Okay.
So my question is, I know we went through this with turnout gear, and I know that we've got that in order, and I'm looking at that long term of life shelf of that as well. But I make sure that we're all on the list of all the equipment, as opposed to one item here and another one have them come up, because that's what's important. We do that with the capital improvements. We know down the the council and the departments look at those things. But so that's my question, is about the kind of a replacement schedule for all equipment.
So we've that's one of the things we've been working pretty hard to try and get a schedule in place. We did budget for I want to say it's $4,000 or $5,000 in operating equipment per year for replacement of hose and for air packs and for
Right.
all of the other things.
the stuff.
We are building those into our operating equipment budget line item. And that's what I wanted to kind of clarify, was that there are plans in place. This is an opportunity, like Mike said, that we have an opportunity to kind of make some corrections and improve our response. So that's what we're.
And I think if things are okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Years ago, when I first came on, we tested our own hose. We went out to the airport, and you guys probably remember, right? We'd stretch that stuff out, and we'd crank it up to 300 psi. It had to hold it for 5 minutes, and then we'd re-rack it on the truck, and then we'd stretch out another 1,000 feet of it or whatever, and then test that. Okay, and that was compliant with NFPA to do that. If it didn't fail and the couplings held, it was compliant with NFPA. Your turnout gear was compliant with NFPA if you had an inspection program in place and the integrity of the gear was good. So that was fine 15, 20 years ago.
Right.
It all changed when they came up with the 10-year mark. Okay, so it kind of caught everybody, including, obviously you guys are saddled with it now, and it caught us off guard with the change in the NFPA standard. So now everybody has to kind of play catch up with all this. Whereas before, if your hose didn't, when I started, we had hose that was from 1966, and it was still good stuff, okay? That's days of old now. I mean, they changed the standard, and the standard is what we get measured by,
And I understand there's change, and there's always going to be compliance changes. The foam was an example of that. Gear is different and all those things. But if it's on a schedule, knowing that you'll have to maybe comply with something that changes, but you still have to have the schedule of all equipment, that knowing, because otherwise you're gonna get saddled with a unexpected amount that might be needed, and of course the council's involvement as well. So that's just my
Yeah,
question.
we've done it. We've radios, everything.
Right.
We're looking at everything across the board as far as a replacement program.
Okay.
It's a little bit of catch up, but we're getting there. We're actually.
I like
doing a pretty
Councilman
good job.
Moore's question about can we get ahead of it? But like I said, if you ever wore all that gear and breathe off that bottle and then hump that 2.5-inch hose inside, it becomes untenable. It was a great question though.
Mr. Pastu?
Oh, I was just going to say, part of it is, as Chief White indicated, there is a catch-up. I mean, all communities went through a difficult time during 2008, 9, and a few years afterwards, and then you get some changing in NFPA standards, and so there is catching up to do with where we're at. But clearly, I will tell you, every budget we talk about, where are we with certainly the turnout gear and number of other equipment. Chief White knows that I want to get on a regular schedule of replacement of fire trucks, so that when the next round comes up, we got the cash there, we just buy it and don't have to do any financing. But it takes a while to get it to where the program is running on its own, so.
Very good. Other questions from council?
I'm all set, Your Honor.
So next steps on this would be?
Yeah, no, just if you're okay with it, we'll move forward with it. I am going to come back at the next meeting. I was trying to read my notes when I met with Mr. Sell and Mr. Lewis and St. John or St. Dennis with AUK, and I couldn't read my notes. But we're going to give you an updated budget, where we are with everything.
Oh, good.
Initially when we adopted this, we were looking at putting some money from capital improvements. I really don't see that as being necessary, but it does give you a sense of some of the things that we have coming down the pike as well for the remaining portion of the project that is moving along very, very well. So the other thing I want to talk to you about, and it's not part of this, is the Horse Cave, Kentucky did approve the purchase of the aerial ladder for $199,000. We're kind of contemplating putting some money in escrow, if you will, in the event they have some troubles. I know Chief White has told them, look, we've had some issues with this and that, and it's been referred to as a whack-a-mole. You get this fixed and something else goes on. So, but we did get a very good price for it. And so I think they're looking to pick it up, here in the next,
They were, with the title issues we were having.
that's right, yes,
They're,
yeah,
they're hoping the 25th was the
Yeah.
projected date, but we might have to push that out a little bit.
yeah,
They're excited to get it.
yeah. Issue with it is we couldn't find the title on it, so Mr. Sell's working the details through Secretary of State to get a new title for it, so.
Very good, thanks.
Yep.
Real quickly,
Brian?
so what's our net out of pocket for the new trucks versus the sale of this truck?
If you were to look at the new truck here, it's probably about 220. We paid what, 475 versus 200, so 275 is what, to be honest with you, if I went back and looked at what we were projecting back in November of 2017, we actually got a much better,
I didn't think it was that high.
what's that?
I said, I didn't think it was that high.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
All right,
I can't be happier. So that's all I have with this item.
okay, next item, please.
Next item we have is, I want to talk about some items that we got started a couple years ago and then kind of held off. We got busy with some things. But I'd like the city council to consider some charter amendments, essentially just putting before the voters essentially sections of the charter that are outdated. You have a handout in front of you. Section C69 deals with duties of a superintendent of public works. And if you read the first sentence, it says the council person having charge of the Department of Public Works. Well, that's obviously no longer the case, but not uncommon 100 years ago where you would have a council member, being responsible for a specific department.
Give Patrick a run for his money.
And similarly, you have one for the Department of Public Utilities as well. When I was down in Florida, I was actually aware of a community that actually the council person was actually the department head, and it was an abysmal mess. But these are outdated. These are two items that I would ask the for you to consider. If you flip on the next page, you'll see section C 86, representation on the Board of Supervisors. That was abolished, I think, back in the 60s through a Supreme Court decision, one vote, what is it? One man, one vote or something like that. So at any rate, it abolished it. So we no longer have representation on the County Board of Supervisors. Also, the Justice of the Peace, I'm sorry, I skipped over C 85. Obviously, that went out with court reorganization.
We still don't have representation on the Board of Supervisors. I mean. So these are all deletions? These are just deletions. Oh, okay.
Just recommending that we just go through these periodically, clean them up, get them off the books since they're outdated. And so if you don't have any problem with it, I just ask the city attorney to prepare, language that you would have to put the resolution together, I believe it is, and it's submitted to the Attorney General's office and also the Governor's office for their review. But if we're going to do so, we need to get this in place probably no later than the end of July for the November ballot. That'll give the state's two agencies enough time to review it and then give the blessing so the clerk can put it on the November ballot.
Yeah, I'm looking at the clerk treasurer because I know there was, when we did this previously, there was a date that we had to meet that was, I don't remember the date.
If I'm reading the schedule properly, it's August 13th that I would have to certify it to the county clerk. So, so we need to take action in June.
Quickly.
Which we anticipated.
Yeah.
And that should work it out.
So only question I have, and I'll see if there's other questions for the council. I know there's no issue with these items. I mean, we've talked about several that are still lingering in there, but I know that the last time we put some ballot initiatives out to clean up some charter language, there was some previous submissions. I looked for my list. I didn't find it. I just wondered if we resolved all those or if there was some that were pending from the previous list. And
I think there's one out there that we were talking about. I couldn't remember what it was. I'll have to
do some digging, but I
Yeah.
think just
So we let me bring that back.
yeah, there might be another one or two then, but if we come with it, there's no issue with these ones. I think they're as clearly explained. There's these are functions that are not going within the city currently, so I don't have an issue with that. I just didn't want to bypass one that we had previous conversation on, whether it rises to be on there or not. So,
And I think there is a certain threshold.
Right.
I don't think I ever, when I was in Farmington, went over 6, because then it starts questioning whether you should have a charter commission at that point. So there is kind of a bit of a, I don't want to say game, but you got to be aware that you can't have too many on there.
there should be a manageable number, I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
So, all right, very good. Other comments from council? Seeing none. Andrew?
Well, that right there would be my only concern, is this would be as 6 separate items, not one item amending all of them.
Correct.
They'd have to.
5. Yeah.
And my mind wanders back to, I think it was 2012, where I think there were 6 proposals on a state ballot, and they all ended up failing. Presumably in part to the number, to the quantity of proposals that were asking to be changed. And I don't have any issue with changing these. I think it's a house cleaning measure like you suggest that needs to happen. There is sort of a tingling apprehension there that putting so much on the ballot all at once might urge the no on everything.
And equally, if there was something else out there that may be more of a more sensitive or a significant change, you wouldn't put that in the middle of those that are just housekeeping, as you said, Andrew, and I agree with that. So we want it to be manageable, so we'll see what the manager comes back with us as a proposal. I don't remember the number we had at the last time either.
Yeah, I don't.
It was at least 4.
I think there was 4 because they were involving like the dog warden.
Yeah.
The building position was the one that generated the most
Discussion.
uncertainty, and there was a couple of other ones that.
The physician, city physician.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the physician.
Need one of those too.
Your Honor, I
John?
think out of all these, I think the 2 that would probably need a little bit of community conversation would be the first 2. I wouldn't
Right.
want people to think that we're they look at that and say, oh, they're getting rid of the person that's running the Public Works Department. Yeah, exactly. So there's got to be a little bit of conversation. It's really getting rid of the idea that a city council person would be the superintendent of Public Works.
Correct.
So.
Yep.
Very good. Yep.
I think you have one more item.
Yeah, the last item is we've had some challenges with scheduling with our our public safety assessment consultant, trying to get some dates. I think we're finding our way into July. And in some ways, what I'm throwing out there is, let's just do it on a council meeting night. We probably would have to start around 5:30, and it's going to be, a few hours. I can control the flow of the agenda so that if we pick one night, that would be either July 1st, which is preceding the 4th, or the 15th. But what I need is to know what your schedules look like on that. I reached out to both chiefs. I think they're both available on those two Monday nights in July. So if you could give me some guidance, doesn't have to be tonight, but I think
I have my thoughts, but I'll see if anybody else does first. I think the earlier we start gives us the latitude if there's a complication or a need of another meeting, whatever that might be, gives us more opportunities. If we start at the beginning, we don't run short at the end.
yeah.
Which the plan start? 5?
Well, at 5:30 probably, but I just and I may have to, if everyone anticipates they're going to be available, we may have to do some scheduling, or postponing the regular meeting that night, just so this is the only issue. It's a big enough issue, and the chief's got to be there as well as all the council members. So
So would we consider this a work session or?
it'll
a
have that
meeting?
format. Yeah, it would
Okay.
have that format. Yeah.
Yeah, earlier the better.
So I think there's opportunity for council to get back with the city manager on thoughts. If we're looking, of course, the first meeting of the July is July 1st.
Yeah.
And if we're starting, if that's the start point, please get back with Mr. Pastu so we can get with the clerk as well in scheduling and making a proper notifications.
They'll be
John?
available, they're available either the 1st or the 15th?
Yeah, we've talked about that, so I'll get the confirmation though that they'll be available. But
Yeah.
clearly their schedule is struggling along with us getting everybody together in June. So
Okay.
Good. And there's other comments. And very good. And Mr. Pastu, anything further?
Yeah. I have
Brian,
one
I'm sorry.
other item to
Brian?
ask Mr. Pastu about is there any update on the bus station?
actually, yes, and if you recall that LET was going to get their funding through SMART, which is Suburban Mobility Transit Authority, receiving their federal funds, is that the project itself would run through their procurement process as far as retaining an architect for the project. Obviously, we have our preference, as does LET, that Kohler will probably put a proposal in there, but they do have to go through their procurement process for that. And then once the architect is selected and the project's ready out for bid, it would certainly follow all of SMART's procedures for that. They are, if not this week, next week. I think Mr. Lewis was telling me that they were going to walk the facility, the area there, to the SMART personnel were coming down and looking at it as well. So there is some progress being made, but the ball is kind of in their court at this point in time with SMART in this project. So
Is there any kind of anticipated date that they might start?
no, I think I think they've still got to go through their procurement process. That's usually, under best circumstances, 2 months for the architect, and certainly looking at design. So we're probably well into 2020 before you could even contemplate a construction on it at the earliest.
I have a question.
Go
So,
treasurer.
if they do the construction in 2020, is it going to be, it's not going to be in the lobby area, right? It will strictly be in that space.
Correct.
Okay. I was just thinking for the heavy election schedule we have for
Yep.
next year, I'm already planning ahead and wanted to be able to make accommodations if necessary.
Some modest work that would have to take place, such as more than likely bricking in some where the windows are in the lobby area, but the activity will actually take place where the former credit union was. So
Andrew?
Just a brief item, and I know the Director Lewis isn't here. If you let me say it now, I'll keep it off the meeting agenda, but on North Custer, with the construction going on, there is a divot made out of gravel in the tires of the cars passing through there have caused quite a rut, and some of the cars are bottoming out, and we're getting some fairly large pieces out on North Custer that are breaking off cars. I would just ask that a phone call be made to the construction company there to have that filled in perhaps.
Yep.
Because we're experiencing issues.
Yeah, no, I'll bring it to his attention first thing tomorrow, because we should have an inspector out there monitoring that type of thing if it's creating any kind of traffic hazard. Yeah.
Kelly?
I was curious, city manager and Mr. Mayor, what were your thoughts, if you had any, on the jazz festival or lack thereof?
Well, I'm going to start, and then Mr. Pastou will probably have some comments at the council meeting. We've had some discussions regarding kind of where we're at with the, I'll just say inquiries, actions of the city, what our position is. And I know that he has that plan to make those comments during the meeting. And I thought we could do it now, but I thought, the meeting itself, there's people that are here and people that may be watching the work session, but sometimes the council meeting, they look for the council comments there. So unless Mr. Pastou feels otherwise.
No, I think it's, I anticipated some question coming tonight, and I've got a response for that. So if you want to, if it's going the regular meeting is fine, be more than happy to respond
Yeah,
then.
it's on the list. Other inquiries for Mr. Pastou before the meeting? We probably have about 15 minutes to get back, so if there's nothing further, I'll close the work session, and